Before you can learn how to forward, first you must ask yourself, what is a forward? A forward is essentially that, someone who goes forward. You're not hanging out at the goal, that's the goalie's job. Seriously, stop hanging out at the goal. There are 3 zones on the field, your goal, the midfield, and the enemy goal. Each of these zones will typically be occupied by one person on your team, although travel between the zones is common. Your goal should be occupied by your goalie, the midfield will be occupied by your midfielder, and the enemy goal is where the forward will be a good chunk of the time, if not most of the time. Now, for the purpose of this video, I'm going to group midfielder and forwards into the larger category of forward, since you won't always have a midfielder and you won't always have a forward, but it is important to learn that these positions exist and what they do. I'm going to start with the midfielder, because that's the lesser known of the two, especially at lower elos. What a midfielder does is really classified by what they are good at doing. Midfielders are all about control. Some examples of this are Era and Rasmus. Era has a strong speed buff on her secondary that allows her to walk with the core, keeping control of it without needing to strike it or to reposition herself so she can more easily get to the core. Her primary debuffs the enemy in a way that mostly removes them from the game for a large portion of time. Her special is a huge aerial denial that can clear the way for you or for a teammate to score.
Didn't expect that.
Rasmus also has a speed buff on his secondary, and his primary is decent, although it sets him more up for brawls and control, but it can be useful for redirects if needed. His special lets him reposition the core or an enemy pretty much no matter where they are as long as Rasmus is midfield. So, sitting midfield allows these strikers to exert more control over the core in the field and really take advantage of their abilities. I see a lot of people getting mad when their Era's dribbling the core to herself and just sitting there not really doing anything with it. Now, I don't personally know what the Eras in your games are like, but often that is the right play. As a midfielder and as a player in general, you should know that doing nothing is better than launching a bad offensive or giving the core to the enemy. If you have the core, you could just wait for an opening to pass or go for a goal or barrier. The only thing the enemy can really do in that situation if they want to stop you or get the core is to approach you. And guess what? All that does is free up your forward so you can pass it to them for them to score. And I'm going to repeat this again just because it's important and I really think people need to know about it. Just holding onto the core is better than trying to make a bad pass or a bad shot. If you find that your ability to see the field state and make decisions is stronger than your mechanics, then I would highly recommend you try playing midfield. Of course, mechanics and reaction speed will always be important, but midfield isn't as mechanically demanding as forward from my experience. Although it still does take a good amount of practice if you want to be able to dribble the core properly and keep the core where you want it. Now moving on to the forwards. What strikers make good forwards? Well, basically, if they don't make a good goalie or a good midfielder, then in my opinion, they make a great forward. Juliet, Zentaro, and X. What do all of these strikers have in common? That's right, you hate playing against them. Good forward strikers hit hard and have strong combos, or in X's case, just his ult. And these allow them to KO opponents or stuff the core. Now, stuffing is a term coined for when you force the core into the goal through the goalie. An example of this is when a Juliet's near the goal and has the core, and does a dash punch combo, both hitting the core into the goal while hitting the enemy goalie, stunning them so they can't defend. That's the most textbook example I can give of stuffing. It's a really important skill to have as a goalie, because you're not always going to get a sick angle or find a way to KO the goalie so you can just walk it in. While the midfield is all about control, you as a forward are more like an opportunist. Your job is to wait for a good opportunity to do something, whether that something be to kill or to score. Of course, you can't just wait around. You have to try to put yourself in situations where an opportunity can arise. That means you need to get to a place where the midfielder or goalie has a good angle to pass to you, or you can position yourself so that if the enemy wants to get to a good position, they risk getting KO'd by you. If you see a situation where the midfielder has the core and a straight shot to the goal aside from the goalie, then you go harass the goalie. You have to help your midfielder help you. I swear, if I get one more forward that spams the pass call out while they're being swarmed by the 2 enemy forwards, aside from trying to keep yourself open to passes and keeping an eye out for opportunities to KO and score, The most useful thing you can do to improve as a forward is to improve your mechanics. Get your combos down, get your angles down, get your core flips down. If you have all of these things on lock, then when you get the core passed to you, your chance of scoring will be so much higher. And the enemy can't score if you score first. A common question regarding forwards is which gear is best? And well, that really depends on a lot. There are 4 options: Slick Kicks, Pummelers, Vicious Vambrace, and Magnetized Souls. I personally hate Vicious Vambrace because it's the only forward gear that isn't plural. Seriously, Odyssey, you could have just called it Vicious Vambraces. Anyways, which one you take is going to depend on your striker, your position, the map you're on, the awakenings that are offered at the start, who is on your team, and even who you're facing. You should really get into the mindset of trying to think, what do I need, whenever you have a choice for gear or awakenings. I'll share some of my thoughts on this subject with you now, however. If I'm not the goalie on Night Market, I will usually always take Magnetized Souls. You are already going to be fighting for the speed boost in the center, and this will help you win that fight more often. Also, the map is a lot more cluttered than the others, so you'll naturally end up passing that midpoint of the arena more often. On Oni Village, I take Magnetized Souls on just about every forward as well. The map is so wide open, and the core moves so much more quickly with the speed lanes that I find the speed boost is always helpful in trying to reach the core. Imi's app and Atlas's lab are a lot more nuanced for me. I personally don't like Magnetized Souls on Imi's app because I often find myself needing to cross from the bottom to the top or vice versa. And when I do so, I don't really want to be near the well in the middle or else I'll get KO'd. So my Magnetized Souls will usually run out as I go around it and I end up slow and helpless. That said, I usually still grab it if I'm playing a midfielder with a speed buff like Era or Jakar, since you will often be able to combine that speed buff with the speed buff from the Magnetized Souls to quickly reposition. As Rasmus on Imi's app, you could take Pummelers, since you're a lot more likely to get a KO, and then you could use the speed buff from the striker advantage to press for a goal. However, taking Magnetized Souls lets you quickly reposition yourself to make the KOs easier, so it's up to preference. If I'm playing a brawler and the enemy team is very damage heavy, I'll sometimes take Vicious Vambrace, since I don't want to stagger before the enemy brawler, and the healing will help with that. There's a lot of very specific scenarios in where I change what gear I'll choose. I often end up thinking about which gear I want until the very last second. So, that is to say, it really does end up being preference. Think about what you find you need more of when you're playing in a specific scenario with a specific striker on a specific map, and this will help you find the choice you need to make with the gear selection. And that's really the best way to go about choosing your gear as a forward. So, what about goalie? Well, this video isn't about them, but there are some things you can do to help them. No, I already covered not smothering them. But a lot of people do ask me what they're supposed to do when their goalie is getting harassed or is flanked by the 2 enemy forwards and they can't clear the goal. Well, let me paint a picture for you. You turn down an alley. You see 2 thugs beating someone up. You take a closer look and you realize that the person getting beat up is your friend. I want you to think. What would X do? That's right, X would take them to the cleaners. He would knock all sense out of them. No one messes with X's friends. So yeah, if you see your goalie getting bullied, try to hit the enemies that are doing the bullying. If you stun them, it gives your goalie a window to clear. Of course, sometimes you could be in a bad position or your abilities could be on cooldown, but it's not like there's anything you can really do if your goalie can't get the core out of your goal. So I would go over there and prepare to kick some ass anyways. That way, once your cooldowns come down or you get closer to help, you actually can. Now, there's a lot of considerations to be had about the advice in this video. Mega Strikers is a very dynamic game with an ever-changing situation while you play. It's very fast-paced. As a midfielder, you're not always going to sit midfield and just control the core. Sometimes you're gonna go kill someone. Sometimes you're gonna go to score. As a forward, you won't always be near the enemy goal. Sometimes you'll need to go midfield or even to your own goal. And sometimes it's the right call for your goalie to leave the goal, to come help you put pressure on the enemy so you can score. So, don't get mad at them for trying. Sure, sometimes they'll do it at the wrong time, or they'll come out and end up not really helping. But you make mistakes too, so just keep that in mind and know that they aren't a trash goalie just because they didn't take out a mortgage and move into the goal. Another thing to consider is that these positions and how I've described them is what I consider to be the ideal way to play the game. You won't always have a goalie, midfielder, and forward. Hell, in solo queue you're likely to end up with 2 goalies. So you just have to be flexible, both in the strikers you play and how you play in the match. Just know that not everyone has watched this video and knows what a midfielder is. I personally really like playing Era, but if the other forward is an Estelle or Juno, 2 strikers that are very likely to just naturally sit midfield anyways, then I'll pick Juliet and smash some faces in. So this was my How to Forward video. If you notice that it seems a little different than my other videos, that's because I finally managed to kidnap myself an editor. I have him in the basement and so let me know if you liked it. His name is Elenator, and I will be linking his YouTube channel down in the description below, so go check it out if you want to see some neat Omega Strikers 3D rendering and some other stuff. Also, if you're watching this, Sony, please give him the emote, he deserves it. I'm currently not sure what my next video is going to be. I'm currently toying around with different ideas, so if you feel strongly about what you want to see next, then let me know down in the comments below. Or really, if there's anything you want to tell me, then yeah, let me know in the comments below. I read all of them, and I really do enjoy reading them, as I've said previously. If you're interested in seeing my future videos, then feel free to hit that subscribe button. As always, have fun playing, and go strike them Omegas.